Hello, this is Sam Lake. I'm the creative director of Remedy and the lead writer of original Alan Wake. Welcome to the commentary track of Alan Wake Remastered. I'm excited to talk about things that I kind of feel should not be talked about. You know, the unanswered mystery and all. I very much think that you own this now, this story, this experience, this game. You are free to find your own answers from it. Your own theories. You are free to love and hate the parts that you love and hate. Nothing I say makes any theory more official than another. It's just my theory, what I was thinking when I wrote it, but maybe I didn't see or know what it really was about. So, a spoiler alert is in order. I will talk about things here as if you had already gone on this journey. Also, potentially mentioning things of other Remedy games in similar way in the process. I will definitely say a couple of words about Control and how it ties to Alan Wake. So if you are playing for the first time, you might want to turn off this commentary from the option screen and come back to this later on. I'm recording this in May 2021. We celebrated the 11th anniversary of the original game last week. I'm very happy to be doing this. I'm very grateful for the continued love and support that all Alan Wake's fans have kept showing us. I'm really happy that we got to make this remastered version, both for you, our fans, to return to it. With crisper visuals and modern technology, now we can take advantage of the power of the new platforms to offer improved graphics and better frame rate and improved cinematics, because they were not the best part of the experience due to some production reasons even back then. And of course, to give this opportunity for new players on new platforms to experience Alan Wake for the first time. This is the original game, remastered. This is not a remake. We have not touched the actual content and the story, just the visuals and the tech. Okay, so let's talk about beginnings a bit. I mean, for all of these creative projects, it would be nice to claim that these stories and these experiences, the visions of them have just popped out of our heads and been ready. But in truth, it takes a long time, and there are many different beginnings for these stories, and sometimes looking back, it's even hard to say where it all began. Some ideas have been bouncing around in your head for a long time, and then suddenly it burst out from the dark, and there it is, and that's one nugget that ends up being a beginning. One of the beginnings for Alan Wake deals with the structure of the story. Working on Max Payne games, I was writing a movie in my head, traditional 3-act structure. But that was around the time when everybody was watching DVDs, season DVDs of TV shows. And I started thinking that this would be an awesome structure for a game story because of a similar length. Another beginning also goes back to the time when I was working on Max Payne games. I went to study screenwriting at Theatre Academy of Finland, and I wrote a couple of movie screenplays studying there. And one of them was this horror movie, screenplay for a horror movie that I wrote in Finnish, actually, and the title was Pohjavesi, which translated would be groundwater, but maybe kind of more accurate tonally would be to call it undertow. And there were a few elements there that I later decided to steal from myself, and they all ended up as part of the story of Alan Wake. So in this movie screenplay that I had written called Undertow, there are several elements that I lifted and used in Alan Wake. The Anderson brothers, Tor and Odin, are already part of that. There is this witch-like character from Slavic folklore called Baba Yaga. And obviously her echo is very much present in the Dark Presence, in Barbara Chacker. And this mystical light switch, the clicker, is also part of this horror movie story already. Another beginning that also was a lot in my mind already working on Max Payne games and just bouncing around ideas and wanting to do something different compared to Max Payne was that it just felt like a big deal and important to me back then that because at Remedy we make action games with action gameplay. And I was thinking a lot about the idea of what if we would have a protagonist, a hero you play, who is not a professional action hero. That felt like a refreshing thought at that point. Somebody who physically and skill-wise is an everyman, even though you could claim that Alan Wake does have attributes that makes him something else than an everyone. But for the challenges he faces, he would be unprepared. For me, looking back at Alan Wake and the story of Alan Wake, certain things just feel like they have staying power and feel very significant and important for the overall experience. Wake says in the opening line, he talks about the unanswered mystery as something that stays with us the longest. And then we have a poem from Thomas Zane where he says, "Beyond the shadow you settle for, there is a miracle illuminated." So if we take Wake's opening sentence about mystery and Thomas Zane poem about something beyond the shadow you settle for, I feel we are very much at the heart of what Alan Wake is about. I mean, we just tend to have this overwhelming yearning to have answers and to find one final truth about things. I mean, that's something that we want in real life. That's something that we often look for in fiction, because that kind of is something that consoles us. It's a very comforting thought, but then very often our lives are nothing like that. There is no one final answer. Things can be looked at from many different viewpoints, and this kind of yearning for mystery it's a great driving force. It's driving force for us for discovery and science, and in detective fiction, it's something that we chase, the answer. It just kind of is a great propelling force to drive us forward. But at the same time, should we have that final answer is the question. The idea of a mystery ending as part of this kind of a cryptic line, it's not a lake, it's an ocean, is something that I feel, having that mystery there, leaving it into a mystery that has kept Alan Wake in the minds of many of the fans. So I suppose thinking about the mystery ending of this experience, it is very much something that in fiction that I get excited about and I love is a part of them that something that you will keep on thinking about and pondering about is something that excites me personally. And from that perspective, I love to craft experiences like that. I love to have elements there that are open to interpretation, that you can piece it together and find an answer for you. This is Alan Wake's story, told from his perspective and his point of view. And at the same time, Alice is a hugely important character. She has very little screen time, but the scenes we have Wake together with Alice, we learn a lot about Wake as a character. And Alice remains as his motivation through the whole experience. Do we actually clearly get to see Alice as a person? Or are we seeing the version of Alice that Alan Wake sees or thinks she is? Because he is very much wrapped around his own struggle, his own flaws and thoughts. I'm a Finn, so I was born in Finland and have lived here all my life. At the same time, I've been pretty much raised with American popular culture, comic books, TV, movies, books, and it is a huge part of the inspiration, but it's always felt like, this kind of a unique perspective of using that inspiration, but being outside and looking in, and that gives us a unique perspective. Obviously, being a Finn and having lived here all my life, the culture is very much part of me, and can't help but to bring in elements of it into my writing. And I think that can be seen in the stories of Remedy games, even starting from the original Max Payne. I mean, there was this huge winter storm that was part of the setting of that game. And it's in other games as well. Finnish culture, Finnish landscape, the nature, I feel has been one way or the other a part of all of Remedy game stories. In Alan Wake, obviously, we have light and dark in a strong role. And if we think about the seasons in Finland and the kind of the schizophrenic nature of winters being very dark and summers being all sunshine way into the night, there is an echo of that in the themes of light and dark. The Pacific Northwest landscape, everything is huge, but in Finland, the nature is much more modest. But beyond that, I feel that there are a lot of similarities in the landscape of it, and also Finland has a lot of small towns with larger than life, quirky characters, and having spent all of my childhood summers in the countryside and in small town settings, it certainly is something that resonates and feels like a part of what should be in this story. Still on the Finnish culture, I mentioned the horror movie screenplay I wrote, Undertow, and Anderson brothers, Tor and Odin, being a part of that already. Now, that story is set in Finland, and yet we have Tor and Odin as Swedish-speaking Finns in there. Now, we never go into details in Alan Wake on their background, but they just might be Swedes, or they could actually be Finnish Swedes. So I feel that Finnish culture will be, in one way or the other, present in all the stories I'll be writing. And in fact, in Control, if we go beyond Alan Wake, we have Ahti, the strange janitor character who definitely has a Finnish background and even a Finnish tango as part of it. So staying with Ahti, and this is a huge spoiler, in Control's AWE DLC, if you do all the Ahti missions, you'll get a postcard from him. And there he is at home and happy on the porch of his sauna. And the title places him in the Washington state. So it is this big loop, and it all comes back to Alan Wake. As a writer, when I'm working on a story, I do like a bit of a guiding structure for it. I mean, there are obviously very different story structures out there. You know, your basic 3-act structure, hero's journey, and all. And I kind of use some of these as a reminder to myself that whenever I kind of run into a problem in the story, then I glance back at these structures if there is any help to be offered. So still talking about the structure for the story. For Alan Wake, more than anything, like as this guiding structure, I had 5 stages of grief in my mind. And that comes to the idea of this being a psychological thriller. And a lot of this is about how our hero, Alan Wake, sees the situation. I mean, we have these crazy supernatural things starting to happen. And so we start from denial, and he can't really accept it. And then we go through these steps of anger and bargaining and ultimately accepting and embracing this madness. And because it's psychological, we have this open question: is this supernatural, and is he going mad and embracing the madness? So Alan Wake is a psychological thriller, and we are on this journey into Alan Wake's mind. And if we think about psycho thrillers, you know, there is always that question on, is this true? Is this really happening? Or is this part of the madness? And if it's madness, is nothing true? But obviously we are on this journey together with Wake, and he becomes to believe in it. And so must we, because otherwise the things that we are fighting for are not really there. A big theme, obviously, in this thriller is fiction coming true. And a lot of effort from our part writing this was to think about what does that mean and what are the limits. Obviously, if we would have given Alan Wake godlike powers to just change reality on a whim, there would not have been much stakes in this. So changing reality with his writing has to be a struggle. It's hard for him. As writing a good story is hard for us. So there is this metaphor going on in this. And essentially what he can do is he can take existing elements and nudge them and tweak them. And in a similar way, I feel that story needs to feel true for it to be a good story. So in the game, through these in-game television inserts, we learn about Alan Wake's writing process, how he was trapped in the study of Bertlek Capin and how he wrote the manuscript. And we learn that he becomes aware of the Dark Presence's plan and how he starts to hide in keys for his success into the story. I mean, hiding his truth and his escape, his ultimate victory into the story. And there is an interesting metaphor there about writing process in general. Alan Wake hiding keys for his escape and his success into the manuscript story is a metaphor of a writer who is writing story for entertainment with many needs coming in. We are hiding art into our stories, and this is kind of a nugget of wisdom from my drama teacher. So I've been asked a few times, like, how much is Alan Wake Sam Lake as a writer? And my answer is not really at all. But there is a certain kind of a truth to the idea that there are, of course, we always draw from our own experience. And I think that surprisingly, a few of the Remedy games in some way are metaphors and commentaries on video game development. So the stories in our games as a metaphor of making video games. I mean, obviously, in these past 25 years, a considerable amount of my life has gone into making video games and thinking about video games and struggling with the process of making video games. So it's not a surprise that these elements sneak in. Alan Wake in particular is a lot about the process of writing a story and struggling with writing a story. I mean, obviously we see glimpses of him struggling with it and thinking about it. So it was it's one of the reasons why this game is so close to my heart. Because as a writer and thinking about these things and then being able to use them as elements in the story felt exciting and felt interesting to me as a writer. Now in this commentary, I talk a lot about my own perspective and how I see these things, but it's always important to mention that making video games is very much a team effort. There are a lot of brilliant, talented people working at Remedy and we're working on Alan Wake, and there are a lot of inputs. As a writer, you have a story in mind and you refine it to a certain point. But then you have a lot of people bringing interesting, cool, surprising ideas to the table. And then it's a challenge to kind of pick and choose, take those in and let them change it for the better. For Alan Wake's story, a lot of the backstory we discover along the way comes from 60s, 70s, and even 80s. Now, I was born in 1970, and so kind of when I think about elements of Finnish countryside and cabin life during summers, it has this golden sheen on it that you often have, when you are growing up, and when I think about the backstory of the 70s with the birdleg cabin, these are the kind of feelings and images that I think about. Part of the big backstory element obviously deals with Thomas Zane, the diver and the poet, Barbara Jacker, Emil Hartman, and Cynthia Weaver, all in the 60s, 70s landscape in this story. I mean, Thomas Zane is a very kind of important character. Also somebody who wrote, and also somebody who is now as the diver, very much guiding Alan Wake, but in some ways also haunting him. And many of these elements are set as part of that backstory. So who is Thomas Zane as a character, really? Through the years, I've read interesting fan theories about him, and I'm not going to dive too deep into these things. But it is an interesting question. Like we see some glimpses, especially in the DLC part of it, where we start to think that is he being completely open and honest with us about his motives and who he really is, and how does this thing loop around between the fictions of Zane and Wake? So part of the backstory we are dealing with is about old gods of Asgard, of course. They, in a way, belong into the same continuation as Thomas Zane. I mean, we are talking about artists who in a way have come into contact with these dark forces and ended up affecting reality in one way or the other. Old Gods of Asgard, of course, through their music. And music is a big part of story and storytelling of Alan Wake. Behind the music of Old Gods of Asgard lurks a Finnish band called the Poets of the Fall. And they are good friends of mine. And we obviously started collaborating with poets already with Max Payne 2. Video game storytelling uses many different mediums, and music definitely is one. And at some point I started thinking about the idea that we would have a fictional band and we would custom create music that would be in-world. And with that, we could have lyrics and themes that are part of the storytelling. And that's what Old Gods of Asgard is all about. We had multiple songs created by Poets of the Fall for the first game. We continued with that in Alan Wake's American Nightmare, and now in Control, we have done it again with Take Control. Now, I feel this is a wonderful direction, and I'm sure that in the future we will be looking into this as well. Other than that, licensing songs for Alan Wake was an important part of the episodic structure, finding fitting songs for end of episode moments, and I'm still very proud and very happy of the selection of songs that we have from David Bowie and Nick Cave and Poe, all greatly fitting into this experience. There are many dreamlike elements in Alan Wake. It is something that very much fascinates me in fiction that I like as well, and also what I really enjoy in stories is time travel, time loops. Now, as we progress with Alan Wake's story, we kind of have this mystical vision quest of him traveling back in time into that missing week when he was in Birdleg Cabin writing the story of the manuscript. So talking about this mystical, weird time loop that is induced by drinking the moonshine of the Anderson brothers, Wake travels back in a dreamlike way into the missing week, and we witness what actually happened there, how the Dark Presence, how Barbara Jacker took over and made him write the manuscript. And then in a mystical way, we reach out to Alan Wake himself writing the manuscript and snap him out of it. Still talking about this mystical experience of Alan Wake going back in time. I mean, you as the player find him in the study. Obviously, we are Alan Wake, but in first person now in a weird way, and we reach out to him, snap him out of it, and then we see a glimpse of Diver actually doing this, which goes back to this, these weird questions about identity of Thomas Zane and identity of Alan Wake. But this fascination for time loops, obviously, in Alan Wake's American Nightmare, we have time loop element there. So I kind of feel that this is part of the dark place and how time moves there in mysterious ways. As part of the story, we discover that there are some people in Bright Falls who do know about these supernatural forces of darkness. And they have formed this loose secret society to deal with these things. Part of it is the sheriff, Sarah Breaker, and we connected to her father, Frank Breaker, as well. Now, it's not widely known, but there were a couple of comic books that we created after Alan Wake, and one of them actually, one issue deals with Frank Breaker as a character. So Sarah Breaker's father, Frank Breaker, who doesn't get any screen time in the game, but in a comic book issue that came out after, we do discover that he is contacting authorities when he learns about this. And beyond that now, quite a few years later in Control, and specifically in AWE DLC of Control, we actually learn that Frank is connected to Federal Bureau of Control. And he is reaching out to FBC when this crisis in Alan Wake happens. So we have the worlds of Alan Wake and Control connected to each other, as is now clear from Control and especially Control's AWE DLC. They are both part of Remedy Connected Universe, which has been a long time in the making, and now it's finally out in the open. So that is something that I am really excited about, and I am thinking about a lot of opportunities and plans in the future. So now with Control and with AWE, we are finally seeing new glimpses of Alan Wake. That is in itself very exciting. I can't say that he's alive and well, because he probably is not well in the depths of the dark place, but he is alive, and kind of Control proves that, and all the more reason to be happy about Remastered coming out. So obviously in this story we have this horror story manuscript, Departure, and Departure name of course comes from beginning of hero's journey. And it is a horror story, and it's set in Pacific Northwest. Close to the end of the game, we see this glimpse of a talk show with Alan Wake as a guest, talking about the last book in the series of Alex Casey books, these hard-boiled crime books. But he does mention that now he wants a departure from what he has done before. So the horror story manuscript of Departure is literally a departure for Alan Wake as a writer. Alan Wake has made his name as a writer and his success writing hard-boiled crime stories, where the main character is a fictional detective called Alex Casey. We get a glimpse into this life through in-game TV insert of him appearing in a late-night talk show promoting the last and final Alex Casey book, The Sudden Stop. And obviously this very much mirrors the Remedy success story. We created a hard-boiled crime story game called Max Payne. But Alex Casey is not the same as Max Payne. Rather, it's very much me wanting to insert a bit of hard-boiled crime story into the world of Alan Wake as well, simply because I love it. So Alan Wake comes from New York City, and for years he was writing crime stories set in New York City. We have a couple of these flashbacks to New York, and that's how New York is present in Alan Wake. I love New York. I love it as an idea. Actually, like, writing the Max Payne games that were also set in New York. I had never visited New York in my life. Everything kind of inspiration for it came from pop culture, from movies mainly. So to me, it's this archetype of a fictional city. Still talking about New York, as this inspiring, almost like a magical place, is that obviously now with Control, we are back in New York once again. And I honestly wouldn't be surprised if down the line we would have more games set there. But this idea of not having visited New York while writing Max Payne games is kind of a thing overall. Like to this day, I have never been in Washington State wilderness, in any of the small towns. Yes, I've been to Seattle multiple times, but not to actual locations that have inspired Alan Wake. So I feel that there are many different ways of doing research for writing. And sometimes, obviously, it's great to visit the location where the story is set. But I don't feel that that's necessarily something that you need to do. Or in some cases, it can even start to kind of mean that the story you want to tell ends up not working because you know too much about this location. In our stories, the inspiration comes from popular culture more than anything. A couple of words about the Birdleg Cabin, which is a very central, very mystical location in Alan Wake. There is an obvious connection to Slavic folklore with the witch Baba Yaga, who has this cabin on bird legs. And we have the two round windows that are kind of eyes of a bird. And in the study where Alan Wake ends up writing, we have a taxidermy owl between these windows. So a lot of these references to this bird. But at the same time, I feel that for every Finnish person, the idea of a summer cabin and these magical sunlit nights of summer hold this very, very special place in their minds. So the Birdleg Cabin is this mystical place, and in terms of like lore that we start establishing in Control through the lens of what Federal Bureau of Control thinks about these things and how they see these things, the cabin is definitely a place of power with mystical properties. All right, then. We are getting close to the end of the game and close to the end of this commentary. I would like to still say that when we started talking about this opportunity of creating a remastered version of the original game, it felt important to us that it would be the original story and original experience. Yes, we have updated and improved the visuals and the technical aspects of it, but beyond that, this is the same experience, the original experience. Or maybe there are just these tiny small things sprinkled about that if you are paying attention, you can notice. Maybe you should keep your eyes open for them. That's it. I hope you have enjoyed playing Alan Wake Remastered. I hope you have enjoyed listening to me rambling on in this commentary. Thank you very much.